being the head coach is a really lonely position. Like I just remember sitting in my office, and it's hard because you don't really have people that you can lean on as much because you're the guy. And Trent's in a unique situation that he's known these guys for so long. If he allows it, he can lean on them a little bit in a personal way that maybe other head coaches can't, because they're not coaching with their former teammates. And so it has been an exercise of patience for some pretty impatient people this season.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, as always, joined by the co-founder of Y Option, our producer, Jim Thornby. The latest CFP rankings dropped on Tuesday night. Here we sit in the back half of week 13. We've got rivalry games coming up here, traditional rivalries like the big game. Talk about that one. Call that one a few times. We've got USC UCLA, coached in that one, Jim, 4 times. We also have a budding rivalry in the new look Pac-12, Oregon State, Washington State, with some legit stakes, also some gripes with the committee, some questions for the committee, and always through a thoughtful lens out here on the West Coast. We are your home for all things college football. If you love it out west, we love it out west. It is sunny and 72 today. I'm on my way to Maryland when we're done with this recording, Jim, and it is not sunny and 72, but I will be fired up.
Not as much, yeah.
No, but I'm going to go walk. I'm going to go walk all through D.C. I'm going to take in our country's history. I'm going to meditate a little bit in the mall, like all the good things. But with that, we got a lot to get to. We got a great guest, dear friend, Nigel Burton from the CW and the Pac-12. He will be here today. His son plays at Washington. He played at Washington. He coached at Oregon State. Oh, by the way, coached members of that staff like head coach Trent, Bray, and he'll be on the call with dear friends Ted Robinson and Ryan Leaf. So, Jim, what gets you juiced up? Because we got a lot to talk about.
The CFP, but not the way that everybody else is all juiced up about the CFP.
Okay.
Because like everybody right now is like, I can't believe Indiana is ranked this, or Penn State is ranked this, and Georgia is ranked this. Like, stop thinking of these rankings the same way you would look at the AP rankings. These are just snapshots of where things are right now. And I feel like, as opposed to the way that AP voters do it and kind of, the way they react to the games, the committee just continues to bring in more information each week and get a better idea of what these teams are. And so, like, there's so much conversation right now about Indiana's ranking. Who cares where they're ranked right now? We're going to find out on Saturday whether they're good or not. Like, we've seen what they've done against all these teams that are not nearly in the class of Ohio State. We've seen it all season long. And, but they're undefeated. And so, like, they deserve a quote unquote higher ranking. And now they're going to prove it. It's put up or shut up on Saturday. And like, we're going to see that with a lot of these other schools, like these SEC schools, like, oh, how about this? How about this? Like, teams are going to lose and they're going to fall out of the rankings. And like, we're going to, it's like, what was Dan Lanning's quote the other about the game a few weeks ago about, like, about a meal, like, where you don't want to fit, you don't want to talk about the meal like halfway through the meal. Like, we're going to get there, and we're going to, the teams that deserve to be there will have gotten there. It might not be the teams that are in the top 12 right now, but that's not it. Like, people look at the bracket and they go, oh, like, hey, why is Texas the 2 seed? Like, they have to win the SEC championship to do that. So we're going to get through all of this, but it's just like,
so let me ask
people are a little like crazy right now about the CFP.
They are, and that's the passion, right? The passion that we love. So where do you net out? Because I'm going to get asked this on a bunch of radio hits this week as well. Like, For you, put up or shut up was what you said around Indiana. So if they lose, let's just say they lose by 3 scores. That's the end of this. That's the end of it. Let's just call that the outcome, the final score. And I don't think that's going to happen. We'll get to that.
Right.
But if that is the outcome, and we know the nuances of how games work, but if they lose by 3 scores and finish the season with a win over their rival Purdue with 1 loss and have drilled everybody but Ohio State on the road, are you like, all right, they're out?
No, I'm not that they're out. I mean, they'll be sweating that last, those last rankings. But again, it will all depend on what everyone else does.
Yeah,
nothing happens in just a singular event. Everything is interconnected.
So let's just talk about the state of Indiana, because I think this is where a debate that's not getting a lot of play. Let's just say Notre Dame wins out, right? They got a tough game this weekend, as we know, playing in the Bronx. We also know that they come out to LA and play SC at the end, who's, their record is what it is, right? They're not even a 500 team right now. If Notre Dame wins out, and let's say Indiana loses and then wins, and they both have 1 loss, Indiana loses on the road at Ohio State. Let's just say they lose by 4 touchdowns, but Notre Dame lost at home to Northern Illinois. Like, where do you net out of that? Like, I just think that, like, it's a fair discussion. You got a brand in Notre Dame. We all know, will not argue what that is, and we have an emerging one this season in Indiana. And I just think that, like, I don't think that we can get past the human element, and I think we should. And you're not doing it, but I think a lot of people out there are like, let's embrace the human element. Let's accept it. What is the human element? Indiana's not a big brand. Indiana hasn't played anybody. If Tennessee, or name a big brand, USC, anybody sat here right now undefeated, having played their strength of schedule, their strength of records, what blah, 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 I don't think it would be with the vitriol that we're hearing right now for Curt Cignetti's team. And I think it's just fair to acknowledge that. Like, why wouldn't we? Because you're looking at their roster and you're saying, yeah, they're a bunch of JMU guys. They're a bunch of FCS or Group of 5 transfers. Like, it's a fair statement. Let's just accept it. And to me, the bridge is, let's also watch they play. Ward Manuel was very clear with what he said to Reese Davis on the show earlier this week around the rankings reveal. And he said, we watch the games. Right. And I think it's important because
how dare they watch the games and not just look at spreadsheets?
Yeah. Well, because they also do look at spreadsheets a lot.
Yeah.
Like, there's
I'm looking at spreadsheets right now that are the same spreadsheets that they look at. Right. I know exactly how this works.
Yeah. So there's a lot of dramatic numbers that are thrown in there. And I just look at this, like, I am a fan of execution. That's what I look at, whether it's offensive line and how you block, whether it's linebackers and path on your pressure, whether it's coverages and the shell of a coverage and how you react to different passing concepts. Like, I'm a fan of that. And when I look at those teams that sit with 2 losses in the SEC, I see a lot of this. I'm going up and down with my hand. I see Indiana just super consistent. I just do, man. And look, I don't think they'll get drilled. Like, Ohio State just lost their center. Ohio State, to me, has just leaned on teams. They could go win by 3 scores, but I don't think they're going to jump on them into a rout. They haven't jumped on anybody, including Purdue and Northwestern, in their last 2 games. So I think we're going to get a hell of a game, but I just think it's important to have the contextual conversation of why people are up in arms about Indiana. I'd be up in arms on, why is Penn State ranked ahead of Indiana? That to me makes I challenge that.
Yeah.
Yes, they just drilled Washington and Purdue. So then I go to, like, is it how do you play right now, or is it your body of work? And that is the age-old question with the College Football Playoff Committee that I think we talked about earlier this week. We've talked to people about this. I remember asking Bill Hancock this on stage with Rob Mullins and Rick George, who had been on the committee, and I've asked him point blank, is it the best body of work, or is it the best team today? And he goes, it's up to the individual in the room.
Right. And it's up to each one of them are going to have a different lens on that. And so this is just a consensus of those lenses. That's all this is. So, like, when they're saying, I mean, I've had this rant before, but it's like when they're like, oh, the committee has to have consistency. Like, well, this person probably has consistency and that person probably has consistency, but like they're not all going to have the same lens on what that all means.
Yeah, I think this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually have a question for you. Let's just put this one to bed on Indiana. Today, with where we sit, whatever date it is, the 20th of November, I believe Indiana is being treated like sometimes Pac-12 teams were treated with where they sit. Not really given the respect that I think they've earned. They drilled everybody's darling Nebraska. Drilled them. Nebraska took Ohio State to the brink. Easily could have won. Like, you just start playing that game and you're right. We'll figure it out. But I think like it's way too cut and dry for me right now nationally of like, yeah, well, if they don't win, then they're out. If they win, okay, cool. Like, I just think that's so not nuanced. I think that's such a, you don't necessarily know what goes into every game. And I will like speak on my expertise at least of like calling hundreds of games in my career or being in hundreds of games, Jim, like tiny moments can flip games. A punt return, an injury. We're going to talk about Washington State. One of the very few times Jean Mateer makes the wrong read. They don't convert a third down. And then here comes New Mexico. It's a one-score game. And now it's a different ball game. Like, there's just things that can flip games. So I hope that the committee listens to the coaches like the Jim Grobes of the world in the room. I'm sure they will. I'm going to trust that they will. I'm going to trust that they will. Going to trust that they will. Going to trust that they will. Trust that they will. Right. So
here's what it is. Everybody wants to open their Christmas presents on Thanksgiving Day. Like no one wants to see any of this like actually play out. Everyone has to have a definitive answer right now. This team is that. This team is that. We're gonna see. They're gonna play. Yeah. They're gonna play teams. Teams are gonna win. Teams are gonna lose. And we're gonna figure out who it is. You know, it's okay not to know who the top 12 teams are right now. We're just seeing like, oh, this is what it would be if it was right now. But you know, there's still big games left to be played.
Okay, I'm going to net out on this and I have a question for you. I do believe, based on the comments we heard earlier this week from Ward Manuel, that at least in the Big Ten and the SEC, the loser of your championship game is going to get in. You're getting in.
Probably.
There's no way for me to think anything otherwise. Based on what he said, based on the vitriol for why do we even have championship games, which is another conversation. Like, I sit in that camp. I understand that with where we sit in the playoffs. You shouldn't be penalized for being in your championship game. Big 12 ACC, sorry. You're going to have a one-team bid. I think that's just the way the season is shooken out. I want to hear about Boise State, though, from you, because you're all over the rankings. We have Boise, right? I want to hear about Wazoo and Army. Like, we know Wazoo is not going to make the 12-team playoff, I think, even amid catastrophic chaos. Yep. But Boise State, they jumped, at least to your point, as of the picture we see today, they'd have a bye. Army, if they win, like what happens? Like, just be very clear if you can for our viewers.
Well, here's the two things I'll say. I think the great thing about Boise being in the slot that they're in right now is that it's teaching people how this playoff works. It's mind-boggling to me that we're almost at Thanksgiving and people still don't understand how this works. Like, it's the top 4 highest rated conference champions will get the 4 bids, regardless of whatever conference you're in. Regardless. So it doesn't matter if you're SEC, ACC, Big 12, whatever. You know, that's my favorite part about Boise being in this, because people were like, well, what do you mean? Like, we figured out who is really paying attention and who's not by this litmus test. So that's my take on the Boise thing. Now, with Army, it's interesting because right now they're sitting at 19. And if they beat Notre Dame and then go on and beat Tulane in their conference championship, they're going to be right there in the mix too. So imagine if Army and Boise both went out and we continue to get some Big 12. Let's say ASU beats BYU this weekend, and Kansas beats Baylor, and then Kansas beats Colorado. I don't know why I threw Baylor in there. And then you get, kind of a random team winning the Big 12 championship game. I mean, I think Boise State and Army are both going to get in over the Big 12 champion. The Big 12 could legitimately not have a team in the CFP.
Yeah, I want that to happen. I want the Big 12 to get in.
Not like anti-Big 12. I think it's more of just like showing people like I use this as like a lesson of like how this whole thing works.
Yep. I wonder if, and we don't have to spend any more time on it because I want to get to the games. But if that happens, which I would love to see happen, what I hope that the playoff does is it doesn't screw a team that has had a hell of a season. We saw it happen to Florida State last year. And I get the injury and I get all the context behind it. But the 14 playoff was horrible to me for college football. Horrible. Maybe better than the BCS initially. But the fact that there were still 5 power leagues and only 4 slots never made any sense. With the inequities we've talked about, I hammered on the 8 versus 9 conference games earlier this week. To that point, I hope those 2 teams win, because I don't think the committee would leave a Big 12 champ out. So then who gets knocked out? Is it a 1-loss Big 10 team if there's 4 of them heading into championship weekend? Obviously, or 3 of them, I guess you'd say, because we'd assume Oregon's going to be undefeated. Is it one of the 2-loss SEC teams? Like, we'll find out.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
There'll be a lot of politicking, that's for sure.
Yeah, which is a sad state of affairs. But hopefully those people in the room will not be doing that. Let's talk about our politicking here. I've said it in the newsletter. I'll say it again. And I think on Saturday we have 2 coaches that will be up for Big 12 Coach of the Year, and Kenny Dillingham and our friend Kalani Sataki. Kenny came on a couple weeks ago. Check it out. It's senior day at Arizona State. They have, to me, an even better story than Indiana, an even better story than Colorado, because they were picked last. Indiana was second to last, so it's pretty good, right? But I just think there's something to that, right? We saw that with Colorado. What was it, 2012 or 2013 or whatever? They were picked last. They go to the Pac-12 championship.
2016.
There you go. That's why you're much better than I am as the historian here. It's a home game. The Inferno is real. The Valley is activated. BYU is real. BYU has been tested. BYU also, in their eyes, probably just got hosed a little bit in terms of how far they fell in the rankings. How do you see this? And let's rip through the Big 12 this coming weekend.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a fun game, because I think it sets up very similar to the Kansas game last week, in where you have a team in Arizona State 5-0 at home. The last 4 of those games all decided by 8 points or less. You had the Mississippi State game where they won by 7. They held off the late comeback by the Bulldogs there. The Kansas game, they won by 4. The game-winning touchdown with 16 seconds left from Stan Levitt to Tyson. Utah, they won by 8, where Cam Scatabo had the TD run to ice that with just over 2 minutes left. The UCF game, they won by 4, where Tyson had the go-ahead touchdown there with under 5 minutes to go. Like, there has been nothing like watching ASU football this year has been a lot of fun, even for an Arizona alum like myself. Because you never know what you're going to get at the end. They're playing to the moment. And like Sam Levitt has been awesome since he's come back from that injury. Last 3 games, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions. And BYU has been really good on the road. They have wins at SMU, Wyoming, Baylor, UCF, and at Utah. And 3 of those 5 games decided by 6 points or less. So I think this is going to be just like the Kansas game, and almost just like every other Arizona State and every other BYU game this year, where it's going to come right down to the end and have some kind of crazy play. So I think that game is going to be super fun. And I think the same could be said about Colorado, Kansas. I mean, we've seen Kansas, I think they're 3-6. They've got to be the best 3-6 team in the country, or whatever their record is at this point. Like, they right now they have back-to-back wins over top 25 teams. Excuse me.
Iowa State.
First time in school history they've ever beaten top 25 teams in back-to-back thing. The thing about that game, how, and you just had Kansas 2 weeks ago. How are their corners going to do against Colorado's receivers? They have 2 stud corners, Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson. The team has 12 picks this year, 6 of them coming in the last 4 games. But you saw their worst pass defensive game of the whole year when they gave up 383 to Iowa State. So how are they going to do that? And then Colorado's defense has just been really, really good of late. They've got 33 sacks, 6 most in the country. They held Utah to 31 yards rushing last week. So I think this could be another fun game, because Colorado's been really good on the road, 4-1, all 4 of those wins by 14 or more points.
Ready, set, dream cabin nestled in the woods. Just 4 hours to go. New job halfway across the country. butterflies before a first date. Wherever you go, 76 fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really cool. Number one, it's at Arrowhead. So it'll be rocking. To your point, we called that game 2 weeks ago when they beat Iowa State, and they dominated Iowa State. They really did. I cannot wait to get a true evaluation of Colorado's defense. They're going to face, I think, the best quarterback they've faced this season, right? As I'm kind of doing their schedule in my head.
Avery Johnson, I'd probably put ahead of Jalen Daniels, no?
Yeah, fair debate, fair conversation. And this running back in Devin Neal, I mean, he's set every record that you could have set at Kansas. And then you have the quarterback run game. Like, I just think it's going to challenge him. I think the receivers for Kansas are good enough. I think the defense for Kansas is highly underrated, to your point. I think they can get after the quarterback a little bit. So I will not be shocked to see Kansas win this game. Remember, the Pac-12 is basically an inverse of the preseason. You missed on ASU.
The Big 12.
Yeah, excuse me. The Big 12.
Pac-12 teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, there you go. They missed on ASU. Kansas has struggled, to your point. 5 of their 6 losses are by a score or less. I think they get this one. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. If they don't, then Colorado just continues to prove how real they are. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, much like a lot of the games Colorado is in. They get everybody's best for obvious reasons. There's a massive circle on them when you see the schedule. So this will be fun, because I would love to see ASU Colorado, or even BYU, some version of that in the Big 12 title game, just to kind of represent where we come from here on the West Coast. We
could know who's in the Big 12 title game this weekend, depending on the results, because it's BYU. They can clinch a spot with a win, and then a Utah win over Iowa State. And I want to say something about that in a second here.
Yeah.
And then Colorado can also clinch a spot with a win, a BYU win, and a Utah win over Iowa State. So that Utah win over Iowa State there, I think, is the interesting point here, because obviously Utah's been struggling. 6-game losing streak, the longest of the Whittingham era. The last time they lost 6 games in a row was Ron McBride's final season, when Whittingham was the defensive coordinator before they brought in Urban Meyer.
Look at you.
But the interesting thing here, and I don't think a lot is being made of it, and I think intentionally so, because of the way Kyle is. Kyle this week, he said he's going to evaluate his future after the season. This could be the last time that Kyle Whittingham coaches at Rice Eccles.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. We've thought of that over the years. I can remember interviewing him at the Rose Bowl when they lose that heartbreaker to Ohio State. And that was the year that they had just gone through so many challenging times, losing 2 players who passed away in Aaron Lowe and Ty Jordan. Just heartbreaking season for them. And I'm thinking, God, it was so hard. If they won, would he have shut it down? He doesn't. It's run it back city. Run it back. It's kind of been the theme. Run it back, run it back, run it back. Well, they're not going to run it back with the same guys. Like, we've exhausted eligibility. I can't anticipate Cam Rising coming back to Utah for, a final year of eligibility, pending what he decides to do. They're going to have to hire an offensive coordinator. We've seen it rumored that Morgan Scalley's highly involved in that, which he should be, right? He's going to be the next head coach, right?
Yep. And that's the thing there too. Real fast on that. Like, Kyle has said that they're hoping to hire an offensive coordinator by signing day. So that is the one thing that kind of puts a little question mark in my brain of the way he talks about that makes me think that maybe he's coming back. But I think he'd probably, knowing Kyle, he'd probably talk about it that way either way.
Yeah. I think the coaches all of them that I talk to are exhausted right now with where we sit. Look at what the calendar is. I don't even know if coaches are going to be going out in recruiting prior to signing day. Just where it sits on the calendar now. It's just kind of gnarly when you look at that.
Not if you're in a conference championship game.
That's right. So you look at signing day or to that point, hiring an offensive coordinator prior to signing day. I don't know, because I think a lot of the coordinators that I am hearing they are talking to, they might be playing in these games. So we'll see what happens. It's a very attractive job. They have the resources. They will have stability coaching wise. They have a conference they can go win. They're always going to be good on defense. They can get anybody in via the portal. I think it's very attractive. So we'll talk about that more as we get going. Uniquely, and just real quick, Arizona TCU, Bowl Hopes alive. Brent Brennan. Let's go. We're cheering for you.
Let's go.
It's kind of fun. Sonny Dykes, former coordinator there. You referenced that earlier this week. Of course, at Arizona, back in the Nick Foles era, right back in the day. So
yep. That's gonna be a tough one. That's gonna be a tough game for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too far into it because I'm like in the moment with all that. But like, yeah, that's gonna be a tough game.
Okay. Well, Tetra McMillan, finalist for the Blitnikoff Award. I made my vote for finalists. I will say he was easily in one of my final three. I think he's the best receiver in America. I know he hasn't had the most idyllic of years, but to me, it's still been pretty impressive. All right, let's go. It's sneaky rivalry week, like we said off the top. And we're going to talk about a rivalry with Nigel Burton coming up here shortly. Here is our interview today. But USC, UCLA, and Cal and Stanford. It's just kind of weird. Like when those two teams, let's just start with NLA, both teams are down in terms of the national picture. So nobody's really talking about this game. They are in LA, of course. And, being out in the ACC, I really feel that has not been net positive for either Stanford or Cal. Like it's net positive because they landed somewhere in a power league. But from an awareness standpoint, like when you're not winning, I think those two just kind of naturally fall off.
It can easily get forgotten about 100%. I mean, because they're already not front of mind of that audience because they're not used to them.
Yeah.
And if they're not having the success, then it's just kind of just falls along. And they're not obviously not playing. They're not playing a North Carolina or a Clemson or whatever this week. So like, it's easy for that to kind of just fall under the tracks. And it's funny that I say under the tracks because it seems like Bart and Caltrain out here are going head to head with that because
oh my God,
that's God bless the Calgorithm. That was such a fun part of the early part of the season. Things have obviously fallen off there, but it's just funny. Like this game is going to be fun. Cal right now is like a 13, 14 point favorite, which seems to be the kiss of death for them. What was the stat I saw on Twitter from one of the Calgorithm guys?
Oh yeah,
they've lost 5 of their last 7 conference games when favored by 2 or more scores, including this year. They were a 10.5 point favorite last week against Syracuse. Earlier in the year, they were 9.5 point favorite against NC State. So, I think that like from a real thing, like this is probably going to be Jay Knott's final home game with Cal. He said before the season that he was planning on going to the draft after this. He's not had the season, obviously, that he would have wanted. He has, 247 rushing yards this season. If you remember 2 years ago against Arizona, he had 274 in that one game. So he had more in that game than he has in this season. Obviously, injuries have been a huge part of that. And Stanford's given up 9 rushing touchdowns the last 2 weeks. So this, I feel like, might be a very big Jaden Ott game.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I love this game for a lot of reasons. Most importantly, I love it for college football. Secondly, I love it for the Bay Area. Like, those fan bases deserve to have a game like this, right? And it was awesome 100%. When Miami was at Memorial Stadium, of course, game day, the whole night. It was such a scene. And to me, a poor non-call on a targeting away from ending that game. But that's kind of been Cal's story. Poor whatever away from whether it was plant foot on a field goal, whatever it might have been. Like that's sadly been the story of them this year and really since the pandemic. They've lost so many tight games. It just breaks your heart every time because, the type of people that Justin Wilcox and his staff are. I mean, they're exactly who you want coaching your child. And I'll still have no problem saying I'm still a huge believer in what he can do and how he can lead this team. Give Cal the resources and that thing can go. We saw glimpses of that this season. Stanford, their players deserve to play in front of a packed house in the Bay Area, period. Like, period, end of story. And, there's just an element of when you're not winning and you're not playing teams that have notoriety within the region that you reside in, it's hard. It's been hard at Stanford for years, unless they were elite. We remember that in the David Shaw era. Since they have fallen off in 3-win seasons, it's kind of been their story the last couple of years. They haven't had anybody really show up. And I think as a player in major college football, you want to play in front of these fan bases. You want to play in front of these crowds. So I love this one. Even though it's a Cal, it'll be a raucous environment. I don't know who's calling it. I hope Roxy Bernstein found his way to the broadcast.
I haven't seen who's calling that game.
Okay. Well, I know he's done a couple on ESPN this season. I hope it's him. We've called it in the past. It's really beautiful. It's a beautiful like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's such a thing in the Bay Area. And then you get to the booth and it's just picturesque, right? It's what we recall college football always to be. Spinning it down to in my backyard, Jim. We'll go from your backyard to my backyard here in LA. I was just over at UCLA earlier this week. This is a team coming off a Friday night loss, so they got an extra day, which I think is beneficial. I also think you get a little recovery, be able to flush what was easily a bad taste in your mouth in the loss up in Seattle at UW, where Washington just finished stronger than UCLA did, right? Deshaun Foster referenced that many times. His team's got to learn how to finish. They also got to learn to get out of their own way. 9 penalties, 10 penalties, 9 penalties. That's kind of been their story all season long. And in this game, with the chippiness that it naturally brings, that is the discipline that whoever wins is going to be, I think, the more disciplined team in this regard. Both teams have had foolish penalties in that regard this season. This game will always bring about that. I net out this. Here's a story for you. When I was coaching at USC, I can remember this vividly. Year one, we made the Notre Dame SC thing like a big deal. Like went to the grotto, did all the things. And what we learned was like the players respected the game, but didn't have like the historical context that we did as children around Notre Dame. And then it got to the UCLA game and it was like, oh, dang, like you grew up with this dude. You played in the Snoop League with him. You went to high school together. You're on recruiting trips together. You played in the same 7-on-7 tournaments. Like, it is such a different rivalry. And I think it's one of the most unique, if not the most unique in America, because of the hotbed of talent that Southern California is, the amount of players that have really come up together. And now you look at this one, you got Danton Lynn coming from one side to the other. You look at players that have gone from UCLA to USC, or Jay Toyo went from USC to UCLA. I just think this is a really fun game. I love that there's stakes to it. I hope it comes right down to the end. Selfishly, as a broadcaster, I like UCLA to win because we have them against Fresno State. I'd like that game to be for them going to a bowl game. So can you win a tight one, UCLA, to help out Guy Haberman, Rhett Lewis, and our production crew? That'd be nice. But overall, I think it'll be a classic.
I love the Deshaun Foster quote from earlier this week, where he said, "A lot of families, the smarter one usually comes over here, and the other one goes to the other school, and then the family is torn." Now, my favorite part of that whole quote is the other school. That's my favorite thing about
that
in the rivalries, when you don't refer, like how Ohio State calls Michigan that school up north. Like that the respectful but dismissive way that these schools will talk about each other in the rivalries. I love that. Like, it's so easy to say, oh yeah, that team sucks, blah 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 blah. But like when you kind of give it like that respect level of like, yes, we respect you as our rivals, but we hate you. It's just kind of fun. And I think, not for this time, because I think this would be a giant conversation. Obviously, the Bruins have won 2 of the last 3 in this, including last year. I would love to kind of like have the butterfly effect. We've seen what the Nick Saban retiring did to college football this year. What if USC won that game last year? Would Chip Kelly have gotten fired that week? And then all the machinations that would have happened around that, because it seemed like Chip kind of prolonged his job length by winning that game. So, a conversation for another time, because I think that would probably take 10, 15 minutes to really digest everything on there. And we got more to go to here, but I just want to put that little nugget out there.
I like that. I'll say this. We should start playing this game starting next week of like, if you could pick one locker room to be in pregame in the country or on the West Coast, who's it to be? I take UCLA. You got Deshaun Foster, who, recruited in high school out of Tustin High School in Southern California, balled as a true freshman. So played in this game, coached and assisted in this game. Now he's the head coach in this game. We know his pride. The home team hasn't won, I think, since 2019 in this rivalry. Like, I want to know what he's saying in pregame. So I think it's on NBC. Maybe get a mic in the locker room. We're just all about like mics on coaches in the locker room. That's our theme this week. We had Trent Bray on earlier this week. We'll get to Nigel Burton here in a minute. Before we do, let's talk about that game, Jim. Oregon State, Washington State. 8 days ago, we were thinking this game is going to be for CFP statements. Washington State making a case. Not the case anymore. Both teams coming off a really tough loss. Oregon State, God, they're struggling moving the ball. They went up against a scheme that anybody will struggle against. I'd argue the same thing for Wazoo, going up against kind of a single wing quarterback run game scheme. Really challenging. New Mexico's quarterback was our 5-star QB of the week Dampier from a week from last Saturday. But I'm curious for you. This one's at Reeser. How do you see this one playing out in what could become eventually in 2 years? Maybe this game is the last week of the season, and maybe this game is playing for a right to go to a Pac-12 title game that might be a play-in game to go to the playoff.
Well, I mean, Jake Dickert said, right? Oregon State's not my buddy, right? Like this is no lot like I used the line earlier this week, from allies to adversaries, and I thought that would be maybe just like for the week, but maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe it's like let's get it on. Let's be the hated rivals now that we're the two teams kind of leading this conference. But I think the thing that's going to be paramount here will be Oregon State's run game against Wazoo's run defense. I mean, we saw what happened with Wazoo's run defense, as you just mentioned this last week. They gave up, 360 rushing yards to New Mexico. Only the third time they've even given up over 200 this season. Oregon State, those first 6 games, the run game was killing it. 256 yards per game. That's obviously when Jam Griffin was healthy. They had Griffin and Hankerson and the QB run game and everything going there. Last 4 games, just 112 rushing yards per game. So can Oregon State get that run game going? That's how they can be competitive in this game. Otherwise, I think John Mateer just rolls.
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you slow the game down? Can you lean on them? Can you try to create a turnover? I think you also got to slow down the passing attack. You look at what Kyle Williams has done, Carlos Hernandez, like this receiving core just continues to evolve as they get healthier and healthier. We'll see how they are on the offensive line in this game for Washington State. I like how Washington State, I also like their backs. They challenge you as well in the quarterback run game, as well as they got a freshman who's playing at a high level. I think overall, though, this is a game that's going to have immense pride from both teams, right? Especially Oregon State. It has not gone anywhere near how they thought. I think the competitive depth has been exposed for this team just based on the players that they counted on being there in the spring weren't there in the fall, a couple injuries, and away they go. But I am a fan of what I think the vision and plan is for Trent Bray. If you missed that, take a listen earlier this week. It was really fun to hear his vision and really even how he reflects on himself as a first-year head coach of a program that he knows and adores so much. Of course, he played there. When he played there, he was coached by a guy who's our guest today, Nigel Burton. He is our conversation today. As always, every one of our conversations are presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. So if you're driving down from Portland to Corvallis, if you're flying from LA up to Corvallis, however you're finding your way to this game, put this guy in between your ears as we get to an incredibly illuminating conversation with a dear friend, somebody I consider family. Today's conversation with Nigel Burton. As mentioned, Nigel Burton, conversation always presented by our co-founder, 76. Nigel, I'm going through my phone, and I'm looking at like a year and a week ago, and I just see so many great photos of us together. So I know it's a big week. You're killing it on the CW. You got the Nick and Nigel show, but I need to pause on that. We'll get to the game. My man, we've spent so many Saturday nights together in stadiums. How has your season been? How is life? Like, I want a real-time catch-up on the show.
All right. Well, real-time catch-up. It's been a great year. It's been cool because for the first time in 26 years, I wasn't working every single weekend. And so I've got a chance to go see Jace up at the University of Washington and his team play probably like 4 times. I haven't been to 4 Washington games in 20 years, let alone 4 Washington games in a year. So it's been really it's been an amazing season. It doesn't feel real. And what people who are watching don't know, and I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to brag on you, is my son was committed to go to the University of Washington when Kalen DeBoer was there. He leaves, and utter panic breaks in our house because we're not sure like what to do. And I don't know Jed Fish that well. I don't know his staff that well. I mean, from times we were around him. And so I called you and I was like, hey man, like we need some help because we need to know if Jed is going to basically pick up where Kalen left off. And Kalen was amazing to our family and to Jace, and offered him this great opportunity. And we wanted to know like if that was going to continue. And you held our hand through the entire. It was the first time in football, college football, that I was just a straight parent, and I felt like I had no control. And thanks to you, really stepping in and making sure that people kept their words. I get to see my son pretty much whenever I want, and maybe too much. So it's been amazing, man. We got a chance to be on the field during homecoming. And quick story you asked, so we're getting into it. The homecoming tradition at Washington is the former letter winners go down the field, form a tunnel for the team when they run out. And I remembered this, but it didn't connect. So I'm talking to Lawyer Malloy the day before the game, and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna be on the field, right?" And I'm like, "What? Oh yeah." And what I also didn't remember is your family gets to go down there too. So it's not just the former letter winners; it's also their family, their kids, everybody. So we have our blankets they give us when we get our letters from the University of Washington. I'm there next to Lawyer and his wife. My wife is there, and our friends. And I told Jace, like, "Hey man, when you come through, it'd be dope if you gave me a hug." He's like, "Dad, I'm not giving you a hug. I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping." I go, "Okay, at least give me 5, when you come by." So he's like, "All right." So he runs by, and my buddy filmed the whole thing. It's on my Instagram at Coach N Burton. And I stick my hand out, and here he comes, and he gives me a high five. What we didn't realize is as we get cordoned off the field, they kind of rope us off to leave through the team on the sideline. And I have this great picture that I will probably frame of us walking by and his mother getting a chance to give him a hug on the sideline right before kickoff. And it's just something that all these players, I don't know if you got a chance to do that at Pitt, Yogi. My mom only went to 2 games, when I was playing at Washington. To have that memory of his mother giving him a hug, it gets to me emotional, man, right before kickoff. And that was attributed to you, man. Thank you for doing that for us.
Well, I got the chills just, hearing that story. And I still have a voicemail that I've saved and will always save as long as my phone continues to work from you. And you know what I'm talking about there, man. A couple thoughts. One, it's senior day this weekend, right? You're calling what has always been a great game, but is now a unique budding rivalry, right? With Washington State and Oregon State. And I think of your son, and I saw that photo. It's amazing. We'll share it on Y Option social media as well. It is really cool to see that photo. And then I'm thinking in 4 or 5 years, he's going to give his mom a planned hug, right? And some flowers, and he's going to get all the things that go with senior day. And I remember mine like it was yesterday. And what I tell parents is something I don't need to share with you, but to the parents listening who are walking into senior day this weekend in high school, in college, wherever you may be listening to this, the number one thing I think my parents missed most was a relationship with other parents. And it was really cool because football brought people together from so many different backgrounds. Of course, in the locker room, we made lifelong friends. Football brought you and I together. Look at us, we came from different sides of the country, and now we're homies for life. I love what it does for families. And I hope that never gets lost amid the transient nature of college football, because coming in with your class, as a walk-on too, as you and your son know, and I was one of, I think, 2 that made it to senior day from that walk-on group. It's just a hard path, as Jace has already figured out and will continue to figure out. And if you keep competing, you'll find so many moments of success that are tangible, like playing, and intangible, like those relationships. And for families, man, it is my parents would go back tomorrow they wouldn't even go to the game. They'd want to just talk and hang with the families and the other parents of players. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to ask you about it, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it was fun, even for me in training camp, watching your son play, calling a game at UW and asking the coaching staff about him and how is he doing. So I can't wait to watch him in the spring, continue to grow there. They got one more game. I'll get to that one at the end, because I do need to get your thoughts on the rivalry game with Oregon before we cut you loose. But let's talk about this year and this week in particular. You've got such a cool role. You are a sideline analyst. You have been a head coach. You've been an assistant coach. You've been an assistant coach at Oregon State. Oh, by the way, where Trent Bray was the guy that you coached. And now you're down on the sideline watching a first-year head coach. Let's go to Oregon State first. What have you noticed? What have you shared in terms of shared experiences, conversations, as we as a country are watching him navigate this for the first time in a season hit by tremendous injuries and just challenging games as you've seen over the last month?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because there are guys on that staff who, I coached DBs when I was there, and it's not just Trent, right? I was there coaching as a young coach. I remind you, I was a young coach. Like this gray is earned, but like people flip out there like, well, hold on, you coach the coaches? I'm like, yes, like almost all of them. Like, Trent Bray, and he was a linebacker for us when I was there, and Keith Hayward was gone by the time I got there, but Keith and I are like family. There was probably a period of time there where if something happened to my wife and I, our kids were probably going to go with Keith and his wife. And so, Kyle DeVan, who was there when I coached there, Ryan Gunderson, I mean, his dad had a locker next to mine. I mean, at our club that we belong to, and watching Ryan grow through. So it's been really interesting because like I'll talk to one of them and then I'll talk to Trent and then I'll talk to, Kyle and Ryan. And, the thing I've kind of preached to all of them really is about patience. And it's really hard because all those guys are used to winning and they're used to getting it now. And they were all fast tracking. I mean, Kyle was at Michigan, and Gunny was at UCLA, and Keith's been in NFL. And just the idea that, they have to be so much more patient. And it was funny, like, it's almost like your kids sometimes. Like, they didn't even talk like, man, he's irritating the snot out of me. And I'm like, man, leave your brother alone, man. He's in a tough spot. And, like, here's how you can kind of navigate this. And being the head coach is a really lonely position. Like, I just remember sitting in my office, and it's hard because you don't really have people that you can lean on as much because you're the guy. And Trent's in a unique situation that he's known these guys for so long. If he allows it, he can lean on them a little bit in a personal way that maybe other head coaches can't because they're not coaching with their former teammates. And so it has been an exercise of patience for some pretty impatient people this season.
He came on the show earlier this week, and we asked him about coaching the coaches, right? Players, they take losses hard, but they can move on much faster than coaches who are living and sleeping the profession and the craft like you did for many years. And he said the biggest thing is him like having to be disciplined to not be on the headsets trying to call the defense as well, like just being the head coach. What have you noticed around that? And you're a defensive guy too, just your traditional background. Like how hard was that even for you when you were the head coach at Portland State?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of learned because there were a lot of guys smarter than me who I just saw like little things as a head coach, so as time management or, manipulating the clock and some things that like you kind of lose when you're the play caller because you're so ingrained in like, okay, what's next? You lose the bigger picture. So I think what Trent did in bringing in Keith to call the defense, and he does, like when you watch him on the sideline, you know what I always notice, Yogi? His mic is almost always flipped up. It's rarely down, which means the way those headsets for those at home work is when they're down is when you can speak. When they're flipped up, you can't speak. You're muted. And so it really shows the trust that he has in Keith. And I think it's been huge in being able to try to, and your first time doing it, there's little things you're going to learn. You're going to mess up and some things. And so it's been nice to see, how he has kind of put all this stuff together and that trust factor that they have.
So how about Reser Stadium? Like, can you put into context of this season and what you imagine Saturday is going to be like as they play like what may become like a budding epic rivalry in the new look Pac-12?
Yeah, I mean, Reser has always been this like you and I'll never forget. You and I were there against USC.
Oh yeah,
maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago. They had half of a stadium. And it's not a big place to begin with, right? I mean, we're talking 40,000 people max, right? It was 30-something. And only half the people could even be there because they were doing the construction. And how loud that place was. Like, it was like the math wasn't mathing. The math wasn't mathing. Like, it does not make sense how a place could be that loud and only be half full. And so I think, this game, this weekend, I think is going to be, obviously it's massive and it's, the atmosphere is going to be electric. I think the Cougs fans are going to travel really well to this thing and support their team, even though obviously the really hard loss they took in New Mexico. But that place is pure energy. and whether it's the chainsaw and just the way they redid the entire stadium to where there's not any bad seats and they're on top of you. And I mean, it's a fantastic venue, and the fans are. I think the fans understand how difficult the task has been this year, and really rode with this team. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was telling a friend earlier today, like, you sleep at the Valley River Inn, and then you drive like 42 and a half miles, you probably fall asleep, and then they lock the gates. And then the chainsaws turn on, and it's a wrap. Like they decide when you can leave. So you better be dialed in, and I'm sure the Cougs will be that. One more on Oregon State. Like, if they win this game, what do they need to do? What would you anticipate them to do as you're preparing to call this one on the CW with Ryan Leaf and Ted Robinson?
I think if they're going to win this game, I think, one, they got to get their run game going again, which was really stifled against Air Force, in particular the quarterback run game, because that was the Achilles heel of Washington State in their game against New Mexico. I mean, New Mexico's quarterback went off, and I mean, he is an uber talented guy. It was really kind of fun to watch him, even though obviously I was rooting for the Cougs to continue their run that they had. And so I think there's a lot of things that Ryan Gunnarsson can take from that film and say, okay, we do some similar things and we can maybe cause them some issues. I think the problem for him is the Cougs are a wounded animal. And you know what happens when you catch wounded animals? Usually it does not go well for whoever's trying to, put hands on them. And so I think there's some things they can take out of that. I think the other big struggle that they've had offensively is they really have struggled to stretch the field. And as a former defensive coordinator, if I'm not that worried about you throwing the ball over my head, I'm going to continue to really constrict my defense around your run game, your offense, kind of like a boa constrictor. And I can continue to just squeeze you until you show me you can do something to really scare me over the top. And so I think, Oregon State's going to have to do those things offensively. And then defensively, I just think it's been hard, man. I watched against Air Force. One of my former players at Jesuit High School, Tyree Blake, was starting at middle linebacker for them. He is a redshirt freshman walk-on who really they had moved to defensive end. He's now playing middle linebacker in that game because they are so beat up. So, I know they've been struggling at points, but I honestly – kudos to Keith Hayward for the magic trick he's been able. I mean, he's been putting Band-Aids over gunshot wounds, and they've done a really nice job.
Okay, so let's talk about the other team in this budding rivalry. Jake Dickert and his team come off a brutal loss where they're up 28-14 at half. To your point, just can't stop the QB run game. There were times, at least for me watching it, like there's just a gap that's not taken care of, whether that was formationally, shifts in motions, just struggle, right? They lose the game. They also have tragedy in the community. A 13-year-old in the neighboring community gets in a car accident and passes away, who's friends with so many of the coaches' kids, including Jake Dickert. Will be linked in the show notes for us to the GoFundMe account. We'll be supporting that. Already have here at Y Option. I know you and many others have as well. But it snapped them right back into reality of like, well, what really matters, right? So now they go into this game on the road, CFP, outside. They were always outside looking in, but they had an argument. Now that's not there, and they're going to compete for one of the better bowl matchups in the old school Pac-12 bowl agreements. That's the way it's still going to work for this season and next season. So for you, you've been a part of teams that have been wounded, that big aspirations were all of a sudden no longer there. What do you know about Jake Dickert? What do you anticipate him saying to his team, and then most importantly, seeing from his team once they kick it off on Saturday?
Yeah, I love Jake, man. He and I have kind of developed this relationship that, it was always one of respect, but he and I have had some kind of quiet conversations away from other people. And it's been really cool. He is a master motivator. And I think if I know him well enough, the first thing he's going to tell his team is, why the heck did we do this to begin with? Like, did we really come together as a team? Did we fight through all the things that we had to fight through just to be here, to be in the CFP? Like, that's not why we did it. What we did was we came together because we were here for each other. Well, we did this because we wanted to see what is the very best we can get out of ourselves. Forget all the other stuff. We don't worry about, and I've heard him say this so many times, I've seen the team meetings, I've gotten to sit on some things. It is not about anybody else. So it's irrelevant what happened last week. That's done. Like, we got to move on because if the main thing is the main thing is the people in the room, and making sure that when the film cuts on, the film ain't gonna lie. Like, did you give everything that you could? Did you act like a spoiled child that when you didn't get everything that you wanted, you stopped? Or you say the main thing is the main thing, and we will continue to fight for each other, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. That's what I anticipate him saying to his team, and they respond to him like not many coaches out there in the country can get their teams to respond.
Okay, a big part of how they respond is because of their quarterback, John Mateer, who's a dark horse Heisman candidate, but he's going to be in the conversation. I'm sure he'll get a handful of votes when it's all said and done. I've watched him on film, watched him on television. You've watched him like at ground level. You've got this rich history on the West Coast in college football, and you've coached other places. You've coached all over the country. But when you think of like Pac-12 QBs and what our audience would know about college football through the lens of the West Coast, like, can you think of other quarterbacks that have had impacts that John Mateer is mirroring? Or are there other players that you've seen in your time as an analyst, coach, even player, where you're like, this reminds me of John Mateer?
Here's the thing. Mateer, he's sick. The stuff he does is sick. And I'm going to be honest with you, Yogi. No. Wow. Nobody. And I'm being honest. Nobody. You watch that game against New Mexico. I'm watching this dude sit back in the pocket, not have happy feet, and delivers absolute strikes on deep balls. And the toughest part about running quarterbacks in particular, when you're doing read zone, you're carrying the ball, quarterback power, you're getting hit constantly, like all these things, is to then all of a sudden be able to then, like, you know, it's like being an actor, right? Going from being angry to then all of a sudden sensitive within seconds, right? Like, you got to go from this, I'm trying to throw these touch passes on the strike 50 yards down the field, and then I got to run over a linebacker. Like, how does that work? I can't do that. This dude does that. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I know this is going to sound like blasphemy. I don't even care. To me, he's so far ahead of where Cam Ward was at the same exact time in their career. It's not even funny. The dude is responsible for 18 touchdowns, and I believe in the last 4 games. He has 0 turnovers. He has 0 interceptions. 18 touchdowns and 0 interceptions is it's sick. Like, that's the only thing I can come up with, the word. And so, no, he doesn't remind me. I remember, Ryan Leaf and I would talk when we worked together. He's like, yeah, he reminds me of Jake Locker. Jake Locker I don't remember Jake Locker ever having a play where he's back scrambling, runs to his left, 3 defenders are there. He straight arms a D lineman, sticks his foot in the ground, and then runs and scores like he did against New Mexico. I don't remember that ever happening. And Jake Locker did not throw the deep ball the way that John Mateer does. He just doesn't, which was really one of his Achilles heels when he got to the next level.
Okay, so you referenced you're a DC. You've been a DC before. How would you play in this game against John Mateer if you're Keith Hayward, if you're Trent Bray, if you're the Oregon State defense that we know is wounded? Yeah,
so here's the issue I think that Keith's going to run into. When New Mexico gave Rocky, I went way back. It was not Rocky Law. Bronco Mendenhall. What Bronco Mendenhall did at New Mexico really slowed their offense down. He went 3D lineman and did a cover 8, kind of a 5 underneath, 3 deep pass coverage. And for some reason, they kind of struggled to adjust as wide receivers, even though that's what they do. And Washington State wasn't really able to run consistently against it, which really blew my mind because they've been so successful over the season when teams have done that to them. So the problem is Oregon State's weakness right now defensively is their defensive line. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to pull that off the way that New Mexico did. But if there's anything in my mind, I would look to a 3-man defensive line, 1 extra guy being a spy, 5 under 3 deep, mixing some man. Because when John starts running around, man, good luck to you, bro. It's sick.
I love it. We need you to make sure you get a telestrator on the sideline for this week. Okay, tell Molinari you need a telly down on the sideline so you could draw a little bit. One more big picture covering these 2 teams this year as intimately as you are. I mean, your crew is lights out. It's aces, man. You know how I feel about you and Ted and Ryan. It's been real cool to listen and just feel like I'm hanging out with you guys during a broadcast. But these 2 teams, they've watched a conference be rebuilt in real time. Like, it wasn't like the season ended and here it was. And we know we're in a transient nature. You've got one of the, as I referenced, I think John Mateer is going to get Heisman votes. As a Heisman voter, I believe there's enough buzz. He might not have hundreds of them, but I think he'll have dozens of them, in my opinion. Jake Dickert, we know the job that he has done and how he's navigated that. How have you, if you could put into context, like, watch these teams navigate this while knowing the league is growing and the opportunity to get a pseudo auto bid in 2 years to the playoff. And we know that players' DMs are filling up left and right, and coaches' agents are fielding calls left and right amid the context of these two schools, and really probably more specifically the success of Washington State.
I think you can go back. I talked to Jake about this before the season, and actually before Cam Ward even left. He sat those guys down. He said, listen, I realize we're in this like weird limbo deal. I feel confident about the future, but let me show you our schedule. And let me show you the schedules of some of these teams that left and have gone on to the Big Ten. You have to win. You at least have to go 10-2 to get in as one of those teams. Look at their schedules and tell me if you're sure that those teams can do that. Now look at our schedule and know that if we go undefeated or we lose one game, who has a better chance of getting in? You know what I mean? If you want to be a legend, if that's what you want, like, do you see a path here? And obviously, Cam was looking for something different, but I think he shared that vision because he believed in it, and that's what they saw. I think moving into the future, I think he's going to be able to sit down with John Mateer and other quarterbacks that they bring in and say, okay, yes, you can go, whether it's chase the money or, be in stadiums with 100,000 people if you want to, but where's the path to get you where you want to be, to get you in the CFP, to get you to New York City, to get you – we might get you to New York City as a sophomore in the Palouse in the situation we're in now, let alone when the hype train starts next year and everybody knows who you are and they see what you've already done, And so I think those are kind of how those conversations are going to go in the future. And I think in the end, I think Jake is happy there. He knows that the grass isn't always greener, and he's seen guys leave, and it doesn't always work out for him. And so I think I think that's how those conversations are going to go. And I really think it's on Cougar Nation to really show up and support them in a way that makes all those kids and those coaches say, I don't want to go anywhere else because look what we have.
Yeah, I think there's something to finding stability amid what seems like chaos. And I feel like that's what he and even Trent Bray has done, right? We know the Oregon State roster, there were many more players that left via the transfer portal. And Trent kept the core of that thing, I think, tight enough to know now you can go recruit to it. He told us earlier this week on Y Option, he said, look, now that we have a league, like you have something to sell, to your point, and you can sell like this path to the playoff that isn't dramatic, right? Like much more challenging this year or next year when you're not independent, but you don't have the same equity that other fully formed conferences have. So I'm with you, man. I feel that way about these two schools. I love the development of John Mateer. I think that's the thing that stood out to me from the beginning of the season and now. So Ben Arbuckle, of course, Jake Dickert and company. And I'm with you. I think that fan base, I'm an honorary Coug, man. Like I love what they have done and have supported that. So thank you for the candor in that one, man. I appreciate it. Last two for you before we cut you loose. When you get to the game, take me through what it is like to be a sideline analyst, because it's different. It's a different role for you. You've called a bunch of spring games. Sometimes you're in a booth, sometimes you're on the ground. But like this is like actual games with fans. And I'm just kind of curious what the profession has been like through your lens this season on the CW.
Yeah, first of all, it's November and I'm a tropical person. So like it's going to be interesting to see how it works in November. But it has been fantastic, man. We kind of the setup that I have you remember the old touchdown room, right? We had our snacks, we had our TVs. It was great. I have a mini touchdown room on the sideline that the CW gives me. Straight up, yo. I got a little desk. I got a TV. I got my mic. I got my chair. Now, my chair does not recline. That's a bit of a bummer. I got a little cover in case it starts to rain. My guys down there, they bring me snacks. So we're good. We're snacked up. And then I get to just kind of walk and talk. Like I can watch the broadcast, or if something goes down, I can, I see an injury, I can kind of walk over there, try to see if, is the kid going to the locker room? Is he staying in there? Is he hobbling around? What's really unique, again, Jake and I have gotten tighter, and I know, Nick Edwards, and there's guys on that staff, that I've known for a long time. But the guys at Oregon State now, they don't get a choice. They play for me. I know their mamas. So I have jumped in the defensive like huddle on the sideline, and I'm listening to adjustments. I am standing next to the dudes like I'm part of the team. I jump into Kyle DeVan's O-line meetings. Like and he looks at me and he goes, and we just keep it moving, you know? And so, like, I get information that I think other sideline reporters or whatever don't necessarily get, and I get to see the game. And the beauty is, like, we've set up a system where I get to chime in because, again, I get to see things from ground level. You know, I get to explain, like, the back and forth chess match of the game. And then sometimes I get the intel before it even hits the field. It's been phenomenal. Now, ask me again when I'm in the Palouse on November 30th, like, if it's still phenomenal. But so far, it's been super dope.
Oh, it has. It's been super dope to just watch you and just be a fan, to be honest with you, man. Like, I love you like your family, and to watch you guys just continue to thrive with, you know, Ted has changed my life. You've impacted my life in big ways. And Ryan, I've loved just getting to know him over the course of my professional life, of course, as just really special people. So with that, you referenced November 30th. I can't let you go without asking. Your wife was a cheerleader at Oregon. You played at UW. You just told this story where we all cried in the beginning, how like everybody embraced as you and your wife were there for homecoming, watching your son Jace on the team. The Ducks are going. They're going to the Big Ten title game. How does your house feel? Is it a house divided at all, or is this all in? Is this all in on UW?
First of all, I'm going to share a picture with you that will answer this question. All right,
Okay.
that you can put on Y option. Nothing comes between that woman and her child, including me. So I'm gonna tell you right now, like, forever and ever, wherever he's at is where she's gonna be. So it is. There will be no question who she will be rooting for in that game. Now it's a little different because he's probably, you know, he's not going to play in that game. He may travel, but he's not going to play. And so it probably will hit a little differently than one day when she'll see him out there. But no, there's no question. And we got receipts. Matter of fact, once again, I'll show you the picture. Right after I took that picture, I think 2 days later, I'm at a game at his former high school, and I see Joey Harrington, who Joey and my wife and their crew, Wes Mallard, and all, they've been friends since they were in college. And I showed the picture to Joey, and Joey's like, "I've never been more sick in my life. Walk away."
Okay. That's
So
a tease.
There
There we go. Dogs in the house. Dogs in the house. I love it, man. I love you. Thank you for the time. I want to bring you back on in the spring because I think it's really cool that you are a father of a walk-on in a system in college football that is under construction. I know there's no firm decisions on what's moving forward in terms of rosters, but you're going to live it as a father, as an analyst, as a son. So we will bring you back if you will come back. And I'm so glad to have you on. I love you dearly. Everybody go listen to the Nick and Nigel show, Pac-12 YouTube, Pac-12 Insider. It's really fun. You two are just like old times. And I can't believe you have like a recliner on the sideline. I'm going with that. You have a recliner. You have a latte maker. You have everything you can dream of. You probably have like a little car to take you up to the truck after the game.
Hey, they do park my car for me though. That is kind of. They do.
I
do
leave
that.
and you get
I don't have
soft.
I'm about to do an espresso, but hey, my friend, again, the love the Burtons have for the Roths is unmatched. I'm pretty sure my son's gonna have to name his first child Yogi, girl or boy, don't matter. But no, we love you too, man, and love the show. Love what you're doing with Y Option. Love Jimmy, the whole deal, man. So you know, as Nick would always yell for Schmelsby, Jimmy. Love to see it, baby.
I love it. You don't know me anything other than I might ask you to come join my flag football staff because currently in the last 2 years, I think we're 2-20, and my wife tells me I'm about to get fired. And I'm like, but we lead the league in high fives and fist bumps. Come on. There it is, folks. Nigel Burton. Check him out on social media. What a beautiful human. And make sure you watch him on Saturday on the CW, calling what I think will be a budding rivalry in the new look Pac-12 Oregon State, Washington State. It's the Afterglow. Yogi Roth, Jim Thornby. That was Nigel Burton. As always, big thanks and much love to our founding partner, 76. Always a presenting partner of every one of our conversations. We hope that they're thoughtful. We hope they're insightful. And this one was special because Nigel's going to be on the call for the CW on Saturday alongside Ted Robinson and Ryan Leaf, and what will, I'm sure, be a phenomenal environment on Senior Day in Research Stadium. Jim, your takeaways from our good friend, Nigel.
Well, it's cool because like me and Nigel will always have a bond. I produced his audition. What was that, back in 2014, 2015, whatever that was, when he joined the Pac-12 Network. So me and him have been together since the jump there, and I always give him. I'm doing it right now. I'm throwing him under the bus here, but I always give him crap because one of my all-time favorite plays in Arizona football history is the Ortiz-Jenkins leap by the leg. I'm sorry, Nigel. It just popped in my head here as we're talking. As you see, when you see OJ do the flip into the end zone, Nigel is the one just coming. I mean, and there was nothing Nigel could have done, but literally, like, basically, as Ortiz stands up, is right in Nigel's face there. Nigel's wearing number 8. So I give him crap about that all the time. But all love, because Nigel's one of my favorite people. Yeah. And it's so cool to be able to see. I can remember, like, when he would first bring Jace down to San Francisco to, like, hang out in the touchdown room. I mean, Jace was probably like 12, maybe even younger than that. I mean, and now he's a walk-on freshman at Nigel's school. Like, it's such a cool story for them to be able to come full circle with this. And I'm so happy for Jace to have that opportunity, but even more so happy for Nigel to kind of get to relive it a second time from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that was my takeaway too. I think a couple things. One, like, hearing his perspective as a sideline analyst, I think is really cool. I think it's not a lot of broadcasts have it. Our broadcast team does, theirs does. There's a few others around the country. I just think it brings a different lens into every game when you have that. Some like it, some don't, whatever. I love listening to him. The more Nigel and Ryan and Ted, the better for college football. I think, to your point, my biggest takeaway is that here we sit in this era of, like, bemoaning, complaining, celebrating, screaming about the committee, about the playoff, about the state of the game. And I love when we can take the helmet off and provide some insight that these young individuals who are playing this game are human beings. They're not just recruiting rankings. They're not just transactions in NIL. They're humans who also have parents. And to hear from a parent of a walk-on in the stage of the game where it is now, and oh, by the way, at the alma mater of your father, and the rival of your mom. Like, it's just really cool to hear that insight. We did it a couple of years ago. We had Big Dave Uyunglele on when DJ was on his way to Oregon State and Mateo was on his way to Oregon. Every once in a while, we'll try to continue to do that here at Y Option, just to remind everybody the human side of football. Sadly, there's also a side that I want to make sure that we also illuminate. And we talked about it with Nigel, what Washington State went through after their loss last weekend. After the game, they learned that Zion Bischoff had tragically passed away. He was a 13-year-old boy in a car accident in the Pullman community. Absolutely loved what Jake Dickert said after the game in his media availability. He said, Pullman is Washington State, and Washington State is Pullman. And they're interconnected. And so many children of Washington State coaches knew Zion and vice versa. I had a chance to talk to a couple coaches as well, Jim, in advance of this recording. And it's just heartbroken, right? And also, of course, brings you into perspective on what really matters in life. I don't think anybody listening to this would argue that simple point. But everybody listening to this should just continue to support not only Washington State and the community of Pullman, but the Bischoff family. We reference it with Nigel in our show notes. The GoFundMe account will be linked there. I love how so many communities have risen up to support this family. You and I are fathers of voice. You have those that are either teens or preteens. My kids aren't there yet, but you can't even fathom it. You can't even fathom it. So we're going to always love on that. We've made a contribution on behalf of Y Option. We'll continue to do that. And let's just keep supporting one another in times where we like to get competitive and debate one another. This one's not debatable. So please, whether it's $1, whether it's a retweet, whether it's posting it on Blue Sky, whatever social media platform you're on, like, share the story, the Bischoff family, just to support them as they're going through something none of us can imagine. So with that, enjoy your weekend. With that, enjoy the games, because pretty quick you're going to be wishing your team was playing. Only 2 weeks left in college football if your team's not going to a championship game or not going to the playoff. And there's over 100 teams that will not be going to the playoff or a championship game. So go enjoy your team. Go celebrate your team. Don't demoan your team. Don't light them up. Go enjoy the game that we all love. Lots of love to all of you. Stay safe. Appreciate the support. And I'm off to D.C., Iowa, at Maryland. Check us out, 9 a.m. Pacific. Only 2 games left. We're not going to miss a moment. Peace.